Drones are sensational tools for photography, but they are mostly used for footage. In this video I will give you 9 tips on how to improve the quality of your drone photos. A few of them apply to all sorts of photo cameras, but most of them are specific to drones, and they're all useful both for beginners and intermediate users. Exposure is the first thing to nail for quality images. It is always better to err towards underexposing rather than overexposing, as it is possible to recover dark shadows up to a certain degree, while there is nothing to do with burnt highlights. The main tool I use for exposing is the histogram, both for photos and video. I leave some empty space between the last bar to the right and the right edge of the histogram to make sure that the highlights are preserved. When exposing manually, at the bottom of the exposure window, the value displays the luminosity resulting from the exposure values. I prefer to have the value in slightly negative territory, between 0.3 and -1. Another tool that can be used to expose is the overexposure warning. It displays striped bars in the overexposed areas. Some people like it, although I never use it, as I found it distracting. When auto-exposure bracketing is selected in the photo menu, the camera will shoot 3 or 5 photos in rapid succession, with an interval of 1 stop between each of them. I always use A&B mode with 5 shots when I shoot photos, for 2 reasons. First of all, to make sure that I always get one photo perfectly exposed, since I have 5 different exposure values for each of them, much like an insurance policy against wrong exposure. It is always very disappointing coming back after a trip to a faraway place to realize that a couple of the best photos are sadly ruined by bad exposure. The cost of shooting extra photos these days is practically zero, so I suggest keeping automatic exposure bracketing always on. The second reason for using A&B is that it is then possible to merge the file images to HDR with your photo editor to get at times better results, especially in situations of high dynamic range, like shooting in the direction of the sun. The software will take the darkest part of the image from the brightest photo, and the brightest ones from the darkest image, thus reducing the dynamic range. For more detail about automatic exposure bracketing, please refer to my specific video by clicking on the link on the screen. Beginners should get used to always using manual exposure. The reason is that we want to have control of each individual exposure parameters. At times we want to use a fast shutter speed to freeze the motion. Other times the opposite, using a long shutter speed to get silky clouds or waves, or to give an idea of motion. If we have control of the aperture, like in the Mavic 3, we might want to use a very wide aperture to blur the background when we have a subject in the foreground, or a very small aperture to have star-shaped light sources. Using manual white balance is not as critical in photography as it is in video, but using auto might cause shifting color between similar photos, which makes editing much more time-consuming. Photos saved in RAW format contain more information, especially in the shadows, and respond better to color grading and color correcting. JPEG photos have already a good dose of post-processing applied. They are in a way pre-cooked, so they leave less latitude for post-processing. It must be said that in recent models of the DJI line, JPEG images have improved a lot, therefore they can be used to quickly share them on social media. The same scene might look very different, in many cases better, by applying some basic rules of composition. And in any case, by knowing the rule, it is possible to break them. One of the most used one is the rule of thirds, which consists of not placing the main subject in the middle of the images, but rather on a third, either horizontally or vertically, or both. All DJI models have an overlay with a grid for the rule of thirds, which makes it very easy to apply this rule. As an example, in drone photography very often we have the sky and the horizon in the frame. It is in general more interesting to have the horizon in their upper or lower third rather than in the middle. Sometimes the same applies to a landmark in the scene. Rather than placing it in the middle, a position on one of the thirds can be more appealing. In the case of a moving subject, it is recommended to place it on the third which leaves more space in the direction of the movement. Look out for scenes containing geometric lines, as they can add interest to the composition. The same scene looks different from different angles. With drones we have the possibility to access unique points of view. When taking image of a scene, it is a good idea to take plenty of photos at different angles, varying the altitude. To get the perfect photo of a specific landmark, it is a good idea to use intelligent flight modes like point of interest or spotlight to find the best perspective for parallax. Bird's eye view photo can only be made with drones, and they often result in a completely different rendition of familiar scenes. This tiny island off the east coast of Sicily is very popular around here, everybody knows it. But when I show a top-down photo to friends living around here, they could not guess what it was. This fumarole in Iceland, seen from above, looks like an abstract painting by Klimt. A vineyard might be mistaken for a cashmere blanket. In post-processing, it is possible to reframe an image, to place the main subject in the ideal position, to crop it to get rid of unwanted elements, or to rotate it to add interest. The photo resolution of drone is lower compared to a full-frame camera, so it is important to take advantage of every available pixel. When photo is selected in the video photo menu, in the camera tab of the settings, there is a choice for size between 4:3 and 16:9. I suggest always choosing 4:3 to get the full resolution of the sensor, as when choosing 16:9 we get a cropped version to fit a landscape video format. To make the most of a specific location, it is important to inspect it well. Often, when visiting an unknown place, the first photo session is very useful for scouting purposes. We take as many photos as possible from different angles and different elevations. When analyzing the images taken in front of a computer, we often spot the ideal shots that we will take going back to the same location. A very useful tool to inspect an unknown location is Google Earth, where it is possible to move around the place with a 3D view on the computer to carefully analyze the scene. When preparing a photographic trip with a drone, always inspect the official maps to find out if there are any restrictions due to regulation. Consult the maps of the aviation authority of that country or DJI FlySafe maps. If I should give only one tip to someone starting in drone photography, it would be to always choose the best light conditions. And also to hit the like button if you found this video interesting. Always avoid shooting in the middle of a sunny day. This is the time when photographers are supposed to be asleep. The shadows are very dark, the contrast way too high, and the result very disappointing. It is much better to choose the first 2 hours after sunrise or the last 2 before sunset, for much softer shadows and a warmer feel. Another excellent time of the day for drone photography is after sunset, when the street light turns on and there is still a bit of natural light. The only time when I take photos or videos in the middle of the day is when the sun is covered by clouds, as they act like a giant softbox for smoother shadows. Click on this link to watch my video about all the settings needed for photography in DJI drones. And don't forget to hit the like button if you find this video interesting. Thank you.